Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Infirmary, where my guests and I try to help you guys out there stay injury-free and make better choices about your endurance pursuits, because there are a lot of people out of there who want to give you bad information for your money. And today I am joined by my favorite training partner of all time, Justin Daerr. Justin began triathlon as a way to stay fit and healthy, but the background of how he got there is pretty awesome. In 2001, he completed his first Ironman and progressed from beginner to a professional triathlete to eventually an Ironman champion. Justin was born and raised in Houston, Texas. He played a bunch of baseball growing up, and then in his senior year of high school, he had to write weekly journals for his English class. And one day, running out of things to write about, Justin jotted down a bucket list of things to try in his lifetime, one of which included participating and completing in an Ironman triathlon, regardless of the fact that he had no prior experience in the sport, nor did he regularly swim, bike, or run in any fashion at all. After freshman year at Texas A&M, a friend asked Justin if he wanted to do an Olympic distance triathlon the following weekend, and he replied, sure. Thus began Justin's triathlon career with a short local race. One season later in 2001, during his sophomore year, he stepped up this personal challenge and took on his first iron distance race at the old Ironman California. Like everyone else setting out on the course that day, his goal was simply to complete the race. He crossed the line in 12:55 with that bucket list goal accomplished and his endurance passion fueled for bigger and faster. Justin's beginnings in the sport never included racing professionally, but over time, after finishing several more Ironmans, he became an Ironman champion. He finished over 40 Ironman triathlons in his career, including 10 top 3 finishes, 18 top 5s, 29 top 10s. And at the conclusion of the 2020 season, Justin retired from professional racing. He is your 2013 Ironman Boulder champion, I believe. Is that
14.
correct? Do I have that right? 2014 Ironman Boulder champion. And he now lives in Boulder with his wife, Brooke, and their 2 cats, Lexi and Siggy. He owns a coaching company he founded called All of It, which all of you should go and check out and read his content and follow him along. There's a link to that in the show notes. Justin Daerr, welcome to the Infirmary. I hope we can help.
Oh, thank you. That was a good recap.
Well, you wrote it, so, I just adjusted it slightly and then read it out loud. But, I mean, like, just reading through the introduction makes me want to ask, what else was on that bucket list in high school?
Yeah, I don't totally remember. I really wish I had it. I've brought it up before because I've actually used it as an example of sometimes things we think will take a really long time actually don't, because there were things like run a marathon, race an Ironman, blah, blah, blah. And from what I can remember, I basically did everything before I was, 22 or something like that. So it's like, oh, you don't actually need a lifetime. Sometimes it's just, you need to think of what it is you're interested in doing, and then maybe they just start happening. And of course, conversely, the other thing can happen. You can think that something might happen very quickly and it takes years and years or decades and decades or it never happens. But yeah, I do wish, I felt like I'd like to write another one, because I feel like kind of 20 through 40 is one phase of your life, 40 through 60. So the only thing I've actually come up with in this phase is that I wanted to be completely fluent in a second language.
Nice. So by 60, a second language.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, like, in college, I was probably peak Spanish, and at times I've known some Swedish. So those are the only 2 languages with a background. But in Spanish, I did kind of the IB tests in high school and stuff. So I was decent enough to, like, write very rudimentary essays and could generally read, follow along basic stuff, and could certainly and can still kind of get by, like, if I'm traveling in Spanish speaking countries, I can get what I need done. Obviously can't just rattle off anything I want at any point in times. I've just always had a big admiration for people that can toggle between languages. It's always seemed really cool. So, yeah, maybe I can get that done.
What is leading the pack? Is it Spanish or Swedish or something else entirely in terms of where you want to go?
So I feel like Spanish is the more practical and maybe, broader reaching one. Swedish is more personal because my mom's from there and I have family there. So I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards the Swedish side just because I feel like there's a piece of my background I've never
Mhm.
fully been able to engage with. There's always been kind of a filter in between that. And so to connect with those roots a little bit more is something that's just kind of personally driving me.
Nice. What context did you bring up the bucket list that you said that you'd brought it up in other contexts to sort of help people see that sometimes things happen faster or they don't happen at all? What was the context that you brought that up in?
When I started the Substack like a year or so ago, I wrote a 5-part series
Hmm.
on specifically on goal setting.
Hmm.
And one of the parts was talked about the actual timelines of goals. And I used that as an example
Hmm.
in there as sort of, we don't always need to kick things way down the road or something like they can happen faster. And so just kind of when you're engaging with something, things may or may not happen. And then if
Hmm.
they do, you might need to be then adjusting the next phase of what you want to do. Cause obviously completing an Ironman wasn't like the end of the journey for me.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there were 40 plus more to come. So obviously I had to create new goals and new things. And so that it's just sort of setting up the premise that, you might get further along than you realize more quickly. And so when that
Mhm.
happens, just keep adjusting and not really sort of sitting back and just accepting that that was that.
Nice. I mean, speaking of like continuing on past your Ironman experience, like after retirement, you've done Skimo, you have run a standalone marathon, you did a bunch of Otillo and then competed at the World Championships there. Why have those three different pursuits captured your attention after a long triathlon?
Well, I mean, I kind of, this is like an area that I actually find really interesting just in general. So
Mhm.
when people who spend a considerable amount of time like fully immersed in sport
Mhm.
and then decide to move on or don't decide but get told they're moving on,
Uh-huh.
depending on what your circumstances are.
Mhm.
I'm really interested in like what their relationship with sport continues to be,
Mhm.
and so for myself, I was actually kind of wondering because I was like, I don't really know. I expected I would always be active, but I just didn't know, would I want to compete in something or prepare? And I definitely feel like just shifting into a like I exercise for health doesn't really satisfy me. But at the same time, I'm not really like I don't want to be so tired from training all day
Mhm.
anymore. So somewhere in between, it's kind of like, hey, what can if I'm going to exercise or train 10 hours a week, what can I get out of that?
Yeah. Right on.
And how can I direct it towards different goals and experiences that I haven't been in before that can further inform me in terms of my own understanding of sport and also don't really have a comparison. Like I don't compete in triathlons and yes, I use the elements of swim, bike, run in different capacities, but not, I don't really concede that. I don't see that as the same thing. Like
Mhm.
standalone run races are not triathlons. They are their own thing. And so most of the things I do, I don't really have any context for
Mhm.
like, oh, this is good, this is bad, or whatever. And so I can just kind of get lost in them and explore and stay engaged. And I also think that I wrote about this at one point. I wrote an article maybe 4 years ago called Why I Still Train. And one of the things I did point out is like, it has allowed me in working with some of my athletes, like to be out there with them.
Mhm.
I don't have to like, I can run with them or ride with them or whatever. I mean, maybe not all the time, but I'm still out there like able to connect that way. If they do long distance events where paces are allowed, like in ultras, like I can serve in that role as well. But I think the most important thing is that it continues to inform me as to what it feels like to do this.
Mhm.
And, it's not always easy. And I like to think that when I'm on the coaching side of things, like I see when I'm designing the training or looking at it, I'm also feeling it. I'm like, oh, you would be tired here. This would be
Mhm.
challenging here. Are you doing this session alone? Are you doing it with others? How is that going to play out in terms of the challenges or difficulty of a session? And so it's kind of just bringing in that continual sort of feedback of the senses that athletes continue to go through that you're working with so that you continue to remember like you can't you can't forget how challenging it is sometimes. And so you
Yeah.
gotta, for me, putting myself back in those positions, I'm like, oh yeah, this is real and this is what
Mhm.
it feels like. And so that kind of covers I think most of ideas I have behind it.
Nice. What have you learned from these three different pursuits? Like they're very different: Skimo, standalone marathon, and Otillo. Like what? For those of you that don't know Otillo, it's a swim run event. You have to carry all your gear with you. You do get to use paddles and a buoy, but you usually also have to swim with your running shoes on. And it's
Right.
basically swim, run, swim, run, swim, run, swim, run. Then you're done. Usually conducted in the ocean and thereabouts, so there are definitely some freshwater races. But yeah, what have you learned from those three different pursuits?
Well, swim run, the main thing that really stands out about that is that you do it with a partner. You can do certain events solo, which I've only done once, but all the others I've done with partners. And at the World Champs in Sweden, you have to do it with a partner. You don't have an option. And so that piece was, I would consider it like not just one piece of it, but actually like the best part of it. And it's just a totally different experience than like individual racing is cool too. They're very, very different because you're trying to work together to try and problem solve all day long, where like the reality is you're having to move as fast as whoever's going the slowest. And
Right.
so you're trying to maximize each other constantly. And it's, I mean, I raced with Lars van Onger, who I'd known for a long, long time, but we had never raced together at all. He's involved in kind of the operations side of Otillo. So he's been doing it for a long time. And that's kind of how I ended up getting into that event with him. And yes, we had done some training together in the past. Like for a long time, he lived really close to my brother in Texas. So whenever I would visit, we would run together or do something. So we were kind of like had like a familiarity with other, but not in this. And I would say like going through that experience with him was, kind of a bonding experience. Like when you go out on a long day, like you are really the only one who knows exactly what happened. Even if someone else is watching, like they're not really immersed in the moment. And now you essentially have something where, it's 9 hours long and that person has gone through the entire thing with you. And so from like a bonding standpoint, a friendship standpoint, like a shared moment, it's just really cool. And there was a time during that race, essentially probably like hour seven to 7.5, somewhere in there, where I was really, really struggling. And I found like, I sort of think that I've tapped out of or exhausted the ability to fully suffer for my own personal benefit. I don't know that I can get back to that place, but I did find that I could get there for somebody else. So I was willing to go very, very deep because someone else was depending on me. And it's kind of like a different outlet of channeling energy and suffering for purpose. Like, so that's a piece of it from like a more philosophical standpoint. That's quite cool about it. From a purely like athletic, what does this event demand? It's really interesting because sport isn't confined by a lot of the logistical constraints of something like triathlon, where it's like, we got to have these roads, this clean water, all this stuff that needs to be there. Swim run is just like, we'll just take you on islands that have nothing on them. And there's no trail here, but you have to just bushwhack across it. Oh, we don't have any road here. We'll just swim to another place that does. And so there isn't really a lot of consistency from event to event where you can compare like, oh, I did this at this event, I'll do that at that event. They really, like, each event is designed and different in its own way. And so you really have to sort of understand other aspects of your senses and your ability of perceived exertion and these types of things to understand like what does pacing look like when you really don't have any feedback. You just kind of have each other. And I think also that there's this weird sort of trying to balance getting too hot and too cold. Like back and forth. So you'll be like Jonas Kolting, who's done these races since the beginning, has kind of said like, you don't really want to be optimized in either the swim or the run in terms of your comfort. So you want to be able to get like a little bit warm on the run and then a little bit cold on the swim. And then also just like fumbling with your gear. I mean, there are aid stations, but you really have to be very self-supported between them and sort of looking after yourself and all these types of things. And so there's just like a lot of interesting ways that you can bring your experience and perspective into it. But then the race days itself are just full of all of this like variables you haven't really been able to fully prepare for and consider. So if you like sort of being able to have to problem solve on the fly and like sort of troubleshoot, and which I do, it's just, I mean, the races themselves are, I think, quite challenging. And in Europe right now, they're getting faster and faster over there, and they're really starting to figure it out. And so that's cool to see as well, because I think there's still a lot of upside to really advance this sport into where it can be like what we thought was fast is no longer even like that fast anymore. And I think that's really going to happen there. And so it's definitely an interesting sort of space to exist in.
How about Skimo? Have you done any Skimo events, or are you mostly doing that as training?
So I use a splitboard, but I have raced Skimo races on the splitboard.
Oh, wow.
But the races I've done haven't involved, they're not super long with tons of transitions. So there was one at Eldora which is our local mountain here in Boulder, that has one at the end of every season where you kind of ski, you skin the front side and then have to actually ski down kind of the more challenging, like extreme terrain of the backside. So it was kind of interesting because I was able, like in the last time I did it, there's a few guys who do it who are extremely fast and they're just off the front, but I was kind of with the second pack and I got dropped in the transition because I obviously have to convert my board over. It takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
But because they're on like lightweight gear on like gnarly terrain, I've got this big burly split board, I was able to kind of catch back up because I'm just bombing down everything.
Oh, nice.
Like a little bit out of control. So yeah.
Yeah, that is, I was floored to discover that you can buy Skimo skis that they like recommend that you don't actually ski on. Like there's stuff where it's like, no, really, like you can't take this on technical stuff. They're really just like planks of like thin, skinny planks that you put on your feet. I was watching the Olympics this past winter being like, gosh, this is a really untechnical kind of course. And then discovered like, oh, that's because you can't really ski on those skis.
Yeah, they're basically like bombing down on cross-country skis.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting because the uphill scene in kind of the Front Range Eldora here, where it pulls from Boulder, is huge. So like, particularly on Friday mornings, it would not be like, you could see hundreds of people doing the uphill route.
Oh, wow.
Before 9 a.m. But there's definitely a lot of people who like, they're very fit and they're converting into this and, they can get up super quick, but they don't really have the downhill reps just yet. So it'll be kind of an interesting sort of split between they're blasting up, but then kind of struggling down. So that said, there's definitely a proportion of people that are extremely good at both. I actually don't really have much background in skiing itself. So I would like to get more into Skimo in the future where I can race some of those events, particularly like over here, there's Grand Traverse and the race in Aspen and the race in Breck that I think would be really cool to kind of check those three off. But I need to learn like properly. I'm a pretty good snowboarder, generally speaking, but I don't know how to downhill ski. So I would need to learn. I'd probably actually spend time just downhill skiing and not really convert to Skimo right away. Just to get lots and lots of downhill reps. Cause I think the uphill reps will be, not that there isn't upside needed there, but like that piece of the skill set would probably not be as demanding as all the downhill stuffs.
Yeah, 25 years of aerobic conditioning is probably going to make the uphill portion a little bit simpler.
Yeah, well, and I mean the split board, I mean, I've been able to. It's a little bit different because you have a lot of surface area, but they also don't function very well in terms of like if you got to do kick turns or something like that, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, I bet.
Without a lot of space. So there are a lot of limitations where on a split board you just kind of like you got to be more like a tank, like you just kind of like you charge everything with no finesse, like you're just like muscling it all.
That's interesting. That's like different from my concept of you as an athlete. Like like you have always been very controlled in your in both your training and your racing. It's good to hear that you've got a tank side.
Yeah. Well, I mean I feel like that's more of a necessity than a choice.
Which the tank or the controlled?
the tank with split boarding. Yeah, you got to be willing to be a bit of a tank. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I think we also just like added to your bucket list. I think we just got 3 races that need to go on that 40 to 60 bucket list. Yeah. All right.
I saw Gordo had posted at some point that he was planning to start, that he wanted to do Grand Traverse at some time, maybe when he's 60, like 3 years off. And so I had pinged him to say like, so we're doing this or what?
Yes.
Because that would be, so that would be, because that again, like Grand Traverse is a partner's race. So that could have similar aspects of like swim run where you can work as a team. I think that part of it would be
nice. I'm going to jump to my favorite training partner bit just because we're talking about partners and stuff like that. I only got to train with you when we were at training camps and stuff like that, but I've always thought of you as my favorite training partner because of that attitude of control. And a story I tell a lot is that go on a run with you, and there was always this value of like, yes, we can speed up. We are not going to slow down after we speed up. And so training with you was always a case of like having to figure out like what hand I had and like whether I could play them at the right particular moment. But I also knew that you weren't going to make a bad decision. Like you weren't going to blow us up by continuing to accelerate. And that was such a important lesson for me in terms of pacing and also just how to like work with other people. But what do you look for in a training partner? What do you feel like makes a really good training partner where it furthers your goals and where you feel like you're also helping the other person?
I like punctuality.
Crucial.
So, I don't mind if people are late or something. I just don't like it to be like something they always are. Like, so if we're going to ride at 9, let's ride at 9. And if we're not, it's for a good reason. Like something came up or whatever. So that's one piece. I think like predictability, like I think you said you felt like I wasn't going to take us to a place that would screw things up. So I think there's that kind of like I know that and then I think too is just when there's been really good training partners, they really kind of tap into like what's going on the day. And also are willing to either realize like what we're doing is together is more important, or like if we're training together and I'm having a bad day and you're having a good day, understanding that you need to be like, hey man, like you need to just go because I'm just, it's not in the cards for me today. But maybe we're just doing like an easier run, and because it's easy, you just say, well, that's fine. We'll just go slower. So there can be sort of we understand we need to split apart, but also like if the point is just to run easy and someone else is more tired, like let's just go easier. And then another thing would be just generally speaking, like I've felt like the people I've trained really well with where we're doing lots of stuff, we spend a lot of time when we talk, like not talking about sport. Like there's just other things going on. Typically a good sense of humor. I think like being able to laugh is really foundational to strong friendships that I have. Just, trying to make each other laugh, trying to make jokes and these types of things. So I guess that kind of means like the ability to toggle back and forth from being like highly focused and serious with also like kind of light and fun and not really one or the other. And so I've never really felt like I've had training partners that I would describe as something like more type A oriented. Like they tend to have, like they tend to be serious, but also flexible. And then, just kind of are usually really in tune with what the other person is doing without necessarily having to have it verbalized all the time. There's more like the ability to pick up more tacit sort of features or body language or something like that. Yeah.
Where did you learn all of that? Like how did you discover all of that as you kind of went through your career?
Well, it's kind of interesting because like when I was in college and I started, I mean, I really had no training partners, so to speak. Like I occasionally dropped in with some people and, there was like A&M had a pretty strong cycling team. So I would sometimes ride with them, and they had good group rides and stuff, but I just never really, it wasn't consistent enough. And I often liked to train at my own time, and they kind of had their times and stuff like that. And so some of the first training partners I really had were like Chris McDonald, Blake Becker, these types of people who I kind of linked up with and started training with. And so I guess it's just kind of a coincidence maybe that the way that I worked with them is the way that, I kind of wanted to work with others, particularly like, Chris McDonald, probably between like 2005 to 2011, 12, we probably spent a big portion of each year together. Training partners at that level, like they kind of are their own relationship. Like because they have like a professional component and they have a friendship component, and you're kind of working together in that way. And then obviously like in Chris and I mean, we would also race each other all the time.
Right.
So there was also that, I mean, we he could take things in that he knew about me to get a competitive advantage and vice versa in a race. But I think we always knew it was always, it's like a good faith thing. Like it was, we really wanted to see each other do as well as possible, while also ourselves trying to do as well as possible. And so that kind of vision together always worked really, really well.
Nice. You've got a great series of posts on your Substack about mental toughness. And the thing that I like most about it was the fact that you acknowledge how difficult it is to actually change it. And you refer to the fact that we've been doing a bunch of our mental toughness learning off of an article that is over 40 years old at this point, but that things are starting to shift. But you say mentally tough athletes have the ability to consistently derive motivation from a variety of different sources that allows them to persist and perform while under duress. And like I just said, you talk about the fact that it's really hard to change. Can you tell us about your story of mental toughness, swimming, and baking?
Yeah. So like the baking piece had to do with the inability to fully simulate certain situations. So I watch the British Bake Off. Like I've watched all the series that are available on Netflix multiple times in a row. And so it started with like, I just watched them like kind of when they came out. And then during COVID, you're kind of rewatching them, like not in full, just it might be like a background thing in the evening. And so now it's actually been a routine where before Brooke and I kind of go to sleep at night, like no matter what we've done, like baking comes on for maybe like 15 minutes as sort of like a wind down. And so I've watched these competitions, and I actually like food competitions, and I'm not really like, I do cook, but I'm just really interested in food competitions for whatever reason. I find them interesting because they have a lot of ways to challenge people and get them out of their comfort zones. And they're all highly skilled, but they're all kind of still like frazzled. And so on the British Bake Off, like the example that I've given is that the middle bake, their middle challenge of each week is the technical. And first of all, if like your listeners don't watch a show, they need to watch the show because it's great. But for the sake of this, basically the technical is something that they have to bake, but they don't know what it's going to be, which is different from the other challenges where they can prepare for them beforehand. So essentially the technical begins with, you're going to have 2 hours to bake this cake. And then it starts, you got a series of limited instructions, typically no visuals. So if you've never seen what they're asking for, you're having to kind of create it in your head. And then you just have to get after it. And the reason I use it from a mental toughness analogy standpoint is that there is nothing you can do to specifically prepare for each technical because you never know what it's going to be. But you can build up your belief that I can handle doing things that I don't fully know how to do. So that's kind of like the main takeaway of, and you'll see people really, really get discombobulated during the technical, more so than the other ones. Because they'll just think like, and then something will happen where oftentimes like they'll kind of ground themselves and just be like, okay, I got to get back at this. And I think that that's, a really kind of a metaphor for sport, like something can just hit you and you're just like, oh my, like, I don't know what to do. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't believe this. And then you kind of are faced with the choice. Like, is that going to be it? Or do you regroup and go? And I think that that is much of what mental toughness is not so much like nothing phases you. It's just that when you get really hit with something difficult, that you manage to kind of ground yourself and then go forward.
Can you do you have a story from your coaching where you have worked with an athlete on this particular thing and seen them succeed at it?
I feel like sometimes it can be challenging in races themselves because you're not always able to spend the full time together with them. But one case where I really was like in both 2020 and 2022, an athlete I coached, Jeff Fayfar, raced Ultraman Florida, and I was the crew chief, so I was literally with him other than swim. I wasn't in the swim. I wasn't in the kayak with him. But that definitely has a lot of challenges that are kind of coming together. Particularly, like I would say, the first time he did it in 2020, there was just like a lot of cramping and discomfort in terms of the last 20K or so of the run. And that was just like a constant battle between just really, really staying in the moment, running 5 minutes at a time, walking 1 minute, kind of really, really breaking it down into itty bitty moments. Like there's a couple pictures at the end that I just think are like so it's so clear how deep he had to go to get through that. And so that would probably be that just comes to mind just in terms of like being completely there and being able to see kind of every moment of it play by play. That would come to mind the most.
Good call on not being in the kayak. That is a brutal 3 to 3.5 hours of just sitting in that position, slowly kayaking 10 kilometers.
Yeah. And that year too, it because Julie Dibbins was there for Dee Dee Griesbauer was racing.
Cool.
It was actually pretty cool because she and Jeff basically raced very close to the same pace. So our two groups for the 3 days were always like within a few minutes of each other. But they had like this big sort of squally storm came in. And what ended up happening was like it created a strong tailwind for like the final 2K. So Julie couldn't really paddle. And so she got super cold because she just wasn't generating any heat. And she did not look happy at the end of that.
Yeah, tailwinds are brutal sometimes, both in the cold and the hot.
Yeah. The second time he did it, it was like picture perfect. So I think it wasn't so bad. And he's pretty quick, sort of 245, 250 on the swims.
Oh, right on.
He can move. Yeah.
When we were talking before we did this, when we were arranging to do this podcast, one of the things you said you wanted to talk about was culture, both like what it is and what it is not. And I was like, that's so interesting. I was like, what a typical Justin Daerr answer. Can you tell me more about that interest, and then tell me how do you feel like it applies to the endurance and triathlon worlds?
Well, I think one of the things about culture is that it's like a living thing. So I think like culture is either, getting better or getting worse, or, potentially not in extreme ways, but like every day you're kind of adding to it. And I think things like slip in one direction or they slip in the other. So, do you train in a place where, sort of, is it a place of encouragement? Is it a place of competition? Is it a place of kind of lax attitudes or super serious attitudes? Like there's just a lot going on. And I think it often is overlooked as to how important of a role it plays in the prep, like in overall preparation and the ability to compete and all these types of things. Because, we know a lot about conditioning and like what is needed to get things done and get faster. Like the question is, are you in an environment that's going to allow you to do it? Do you have the training partners that are going to help you get there? Do you have a support team that is on board with what you're doing? Because I think if you're just like existing in a silo of, I have this vision for where I want to be and everyone else is like hanging out, it's going to be hard to kind of get there. And so I just, I kind of think about like, what is an environment or a culture where the things that I want to get done can be done maybe more easily is maybe not the right word. It's not to say that it would be easy, but it just that it more accessible maybe. And I think some of the descriptions of training partners sort of speaks to that. Like that is kind of like a culture of the group that I would want to train in is, they laugh and they're serious, or, they don't see training as competition, even though they know they are competing against me. Potentially. They're like, I'm going to try and beat Justin in the race, not today, which is fine. That's good. And so, I guess that's kind of what comes to mind initially.
Can you talk about a culture that you've been in that has really embodied that? And it sounds to me when you said like making things more accessible, what you're talking about is limiting friction. So like you're helping, like in an ideal culture, an athlete is surrounded by ideas or people or circumstances that limit the friction of doing the incredibly difficult logistical challenges of a triathlon. Like I talk to people a lot and say like, yeah, it's less a physical challenge and more a logistical challenge. Like, can you get to
Mm,
the pool? Are you willing to take
yeah.
4 showers a day? How much can you
Mhm.
eat?
Right.
Like how much is your partner willing to kind of put up with and stuff like that. But can you
I'd
think
also
of,
add
yeah, go
the
ahead.
no, I was gonna say I'd also add the like the ability for it to not actually be that exciting.
Mm,
'Cause when I used to run those endurance corner camps, you know, we would we would have about a week where a good age group, I mean, highly accomplished age groupers, they'd come in and they'd put together a really solid, maybe 25, 30 hour week of training. And they would ask me, how does this compare to, a regular week of mine? And I was always like, it's just much more boring.
yeah.
Like people are, I was like, you just got to get up and do these things. And there's
Mhm.
not like groups of people to motivate you. And there's like this environment. It's just kind of like, it is, it is just kind of what you do. But at the same time, I would say like, it doesn't, it doesn't mean that it wasn't enjoyable. It's kind of taking enjoyment in the sort of simple or oh, I'm going to ride this route in reverse today. That's going to be made, like, I don't know,
Yeah, totally.
like not really that much, not that you're not really changing that much up,
Mhm.
and, I think for those that are kind of willing to do that, it makes it more attainable. I think if you're somebody who needs a lot of variety and stimulation, it would be challenging to try to be, maybe a long course triathlete. There's just only so much stimulation you can bring in.
What would you, so that athlete who is like sort of wrestling with the fact that they're going to have to do something pretty boring most days for a lot of days, what aspects of culture do you think would help them deal with that?
I don't know that I could answer that. I feel like that's something I would need to like take a long walk and think about
Got
for
it.
a long
Okay.
time
Well, part
because it's
two.
sort of be because I do think a little bit about what helps people go against their tendencies.
Hmm.
So like if you are somebody who's really inclined to want to do certain things this way, but what's required for success is all the way over here, I think what I would probably try to be doing would just be like inching you there one, like just slowly, slowly, slowly trying to get you towards that. And maybe enough time comes that you get there. But I also think that I think within a culture where it might succeed would be certain things need to be done collectively, but then we need to also be able to understand that we all do have slightly individual differences. Certainly like that gets appreciated when it comes to, the style of training that you might give, maybe higher intensity to some, longer intervals to another, whatever,
Hmm.
because of their natural profile, their recovery profile, something like that. So I think there could be maybe elements where you're like, we're going to come together and do certain things as a group, and that's kind of a non-negotiable.
Hmm.
Maybe the warm-ups or something, and then we will diverge into more sectored pieces where there's individualization that's considered, but we can hopefully work somewhat collectively within
Hmm.
that and then come back together again. So sort of like going in and out of, we are as one, and then we are also one ourselves. That's
Nice.
probably how I would think about it.
That sounds like a
Yeah.
great culture. I mean, that sounds like the camps that we would attend, like there was like a big
Mhm.
group, but then, we were individuals within that group. And that's really why like training camps were always my like favorite, 2 to 4 weeks out of the year, because like you got to monotask, you got to focus on yourself, but you're also surrounded by usually a pretty positive and supportive culture, one that reduced friction. And like you said,
Mhm.
got you to do the things that maybe you didn't really want to do every day. Another thing you put is you want to talk about longevity versus performance, which I just totally
Yeah.
loved seeing because like one of the things I try to do in the show is like sort of tease out the nuanced differences between what gets said out there on the internet or, just in the general zeitgeist. And there's a lot of confusion out there. And like, I think a lot of this confusion comes probably for some of Peter Attia's work, like very well intentioned. Like that's where we got a lot of zone 2 training. And then this idea about like VO2 max for longevity. And then all of a sudden we have people who are like, I'm only going to do zone 2 training, or like, I'm only going to do VO2 max training. And I know that that's generally not going to work in terms of developing somebody's performance. But Could you talk a little bit about that particular like opposition of ideas and like what, yeah, where do you think this kind of false dichotomy is coming from?
Well, I just think that there's things that get talked about together where like the purpose of it are not the same. I didn't really realize how tuned in I was as kind of longevity discussions. There was this I do this kind of online trivia
Hmm.
thing, and they have these different leagues where it's more head to head, but then in between those seasons they just have these one day trivia questions, and basically the entirety of the league can do them.
Hmm.
And I'm in a very low tier, so this means if I do those, I go against the people who do very, very well. And then basically you're scored on a percentile of like where you finished. And if I'm like doing pretty well, I might finish in like the 30th or 50th percentile of something that I generally usually know a decent amount about, like something in the American history genre or
Okay.
sports or something like that.
Wow.
So in longevity, I was 99th percentile. So they had this question on like the longevity piece. And really what it had to do with was like, you have to pick certain questions that you think most people will get wrong.
Nice.
And I picked ones where it was like, less than 10% of the people got this question right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I guess I'm, what sort of like the people that are in that space and the conversations that they're having is something that I guess I follow a little bit more so. And I think I had been drawn to it as what is something that these individuals that are interested in, this is hyperbolic, but potentially living forever, like what is something that they're playing around with that maybe I could take back into the world of high performance, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where I think my interest lay. Like, just for example, do you know Bryan Johnson, the guy who?
Yes. Yeah. He's the one who is trying to live forever.
Yeah, he is. I mean, his motto is "Don't die" and stuff. And I think when he first started like getting a lot of attention on the internet, I just kind of saw. I think maybe Steve Magnus commented on something, and I was like, the message I was getting was there's this tech guy that wants to live forever, and he's trying to hack his way through it. But then he appeared on Rich Roll's podcast like a month after this happened, and I was like, I don't think Rich would. Like, I don't know if like maybe this conversation is not what I expect it to be. Like maybe there's a little bit more to this. And I listened to Rich and Bryan talk, and I did kind of like I did actually come away with thinking about things a little bit differently, because I was like, I think there's actually some things that could be really helpful that he's willing to go through that we can learn from. And one of them was I think he used a Whoop, which had like a sleep score, and he had some consecutive streak of like 100, 100 out of 100 score for 6 months. And I was like, I don't care if like I don't live one day longer, but if you could tell me that every night I could get 100 score or like the best sleep possible, I feel like the years that I have left are going to be a lot better.
Yeah.
And so that would be like something where I would say like, what can you take from longevity space and then bring it into high performance?
Nice.
I think what gets more confusing is sort of like the things that they're willing to do will also compromise high performance, whether that means like, fasting a certain point in time in the day, or avoiding certain types of foods or nutrients, or the way that they design training programs and these types of things. And so I think it's just important to realize that like there's definitely things that each world can take from both, but the objectives are very different. And oftentimes like, the highest of high performance is not necessarily in the spirit of trying to live your longest, to be frank.
Nice.
And so I just think that needs to kind of be an understanding that we're grappling with, is like, if you want to take something to its extreme, then there's always trade-offs. And so
everybody go and listen to that Rich Roll, Bryan Johnson episode. I'll put a link in the show notes. I haven't listened to that one, but I definitely will, because you're right. Like, I mean, I have an athlete that I work with right now who is about as optimized for time as he can be. He's one of those incredibly busy athletes. He's a CFO of a large port on the West Coast. It's a big job. And he manages about 7 hours of sleep a night, which is pretty incredible given his training load, but has experienced some hiccups recently health wise, and like his doctor has been like, you know, getting like another hour of sleep a day would really help, or deepening your sleep, you know, deepening the quality of your sleep. And it's like one of those things where
Sure.
it's like, yeah, we all know the basics, but finding a way to truly optimize our sleep is going to be something as the sport keeps getting faster and faster. I mean, at the professional or the amateur level. I mean, like, you want to qualify for Kona now in the sort of 35 to 50 range as a guy, you're going fast. You're going like the times,
Yeah.
like some of the times that I was going as a professional 15 years ago. and
100.
and sleep has got to be a part of it, because like sleep is sort of the biggest performance enhancing drug. So that's interesting. I didn't expect that to be your answer. I thought you were going to be more on the like, this is this and this is this, but as expected, I got a nuanced answer from Justin Daerr.
Yeah.
What is working with you as an athlete like? I'm not going to ask you like, what's your coaching philosophy, because that's just too big of a question. But like, when athletes come to work with you, like, what do you want their experience to be like?
Well, I mean, I've written a little bit about, how I think I can have a positive impact on an athlete.
Mhm.
And really it's like, I want to find what's sustainable and repeat it so that you're getting more and more satisfaction out of what you're doing, and that it's adding to your life versus taking from it. And I just think when sport is like at its best, I think it's one of the greatest things in the world. I think it brings out many, many good things, but it can also be like, it can be there's something this guy, sociologist named Coakley, has written about called the sport ethic. And it's sort of like when people are good at sport, it can excuse a lot of bad things about them.
Yeah.
So sport can also, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. He's like got 40 years of research. So don't think that's the only thing he said. But my point being, just kind of like, it gets complex when it gets away from what it could truly be.
Yeah.
Right? So I try to work within the spirit of like, I think that it often reveals more about ourselves than we probably thought we were capable of. And then that can transition into other areas of our life. I think it can get you around to different parts of the world that you may not see. It can get you around, like here in Boulder, for instance. I've talked to people who don't really, um, ride bikes or get involved in sport or these types of things. There's not a lot of those in Boulder, but there are some.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they have no idea like what is 5 miles outside of town, like, or like what's in the mountains. Like you just kind of exist in your world. And so I think sport really opens up the world to you, as far as like, particularly, if it involves, having to travel long distances in order to get your training done, so that expands your horizon. Going to the races themselves, when I was racing professionally, I certainly had like races that I picked out for the purposes of earning money or doing those types of things. But I tried to one time a year do something that I felt added to my life experience.
Nice.
So I was like, what is something that'll take me somewhere and make me do something that only the sport could have brought me? And I also think that it allows you to, like, the world gets seen at different speeds. So like, if you drive down a country road in your car, you see the world one way. If you ride it on a bike, it slows it down. If you go running, it slows it down. If you go walking, it slows it down. And each of those is like a different way to experience the world. And so sport can bring that out. And, I think too, if you lean into the boredom piece that we talked about, like that harder and harder to find in a world of a lot of ways to not be bored. And so, but it's in those times as well that you really get to kind of reflect upon, I don't know, things that have a deeper meaning sometimes, where you sort things out when you're just kind of left with your own thoughts. So I've kind of gotten away to how I think this would help athletes. But I guess my point is, like, I want them to feel the way that I feel with sport that way. Nice. I want them to just be like, this is not something that I plan to do for 18 months because I wrote a bucket list thing. Like, I want you don't have to be an elite or competitive athlete your whole life, but I want you to be an athlete for life. I want you to never, ever see yourself in any, like, no matter what your speed is or fitness is, you're still existing as an athlete. And that's an important part of who we are as people. I think it brings out a little bit of the better side of us. And I think, sport itself or competition where it can get you to do something that you may have not thought possible is also really.
Do you feel like that's the culture that you're trying to build with your coaching company?
I think so. I like to think of like, I am here to support athletes in whatever it is they're choosing to do. So I always say like the athlete is the CEO of their own progression. And like, I work under that piece. So I'm or an assistant superintendent or something like that. Like I exist on the second level where I'm like, I'm trying to give you what I think are good ideas for you to implement for your own journey. But you are in charge of your own progression. So you can choose to listen to me or not listen to me. That's fine. If you don't listen to me a lot, you might consider whether I'm good for this role. But, I want to be like, I don't really come in with, if an athlete, let's say they wanted to stack a schedule or something like that I thought was a little aggressive. I don't ever just say like, don't do that or something, I just kind of say, here are the things to consider in making these decisions. But once you make the decision, I'm going to work within your choices to try to maximize your performance and help you as best I can within that. So I'm not really here to tell you exactly what to do. I'm really just here to support the decisions and the competitions or whatever that you want to do. And support you in whatever role I can.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing I hear out of that is, a lot of athletes misunderstand the fact that like they are the employer and the coach is sort of I always say like a trusted consultant, or like hopefully trusted consultant, somebody who is providing guidance, but not necessarily doing it for the athlete. Because I think that goes back to what you're talking about the mental toughness thing, the ability to like problem solve and like deal with curveballs. Like if you're a coach who's sort of doing everything for your athletes, and I definitely experienced this when I was a young teacher. I had one of my supervisors came to class and was like, you are doing too much. Like you need to let them come to you. And
yeah.
They were great because they were like, look, I get it. You're really trying to make this work. But the only way that teaching works is if the kids are actively involved in the process. And and it sounds to me that that's what you're also describing as the athletes that you work with, is getting them to make the decisions. And then you're sort of in this like advisor role.
Yeah. Well, and I think it speaks to the importance, not even as importance, the absolute necessity of having intrinsic motivation. And I think, so an example that I kind of give along those lines is, an athlete can be, or a course or a competition or whatever can suit an athlete, right? So maybe somebody is on paper very good with this course or these race dynamics or whatever, but they really, really want to race this other race that is not for them, but they're highly motivated. I will always choose the event that doesn't suit them. Because I'm like, yeah, but you'll do work.
Right.
Like if you're motivated, you're going to do the work for that. And it doesn't matter like what suits us. It's like wherever our interest is taking us is where you're more likely to, train on the days where it's more challenging than the others and get more and more work done. And so I think that was also sort of, when I was growing up, taking certain types of tests that tell you, oh, you're good in this. Like, I was way more of a math science guy, but I was always interested in literature and history. And that's what I've continued to be. I guess I use math and science as a means as needed. And maybe that's helpful that I can work in that space without it having to be as hard sometimes. But like I pour all my interest in the other side of things that are maybe not as, like, I'm not necessarily naturally as good at or whatever that means. But so I think the same applies in athletics. Like we have to go where our interests are. And because that's going to make us do the things that we might not otherwise do.
Nice. Where can people follow you, get in touch with you if they want to work with you in terms of coaching? Where is the Justin Daerr ecosystem these days?
I exist on most platforms with just my name.
Great.
But I'm really just primarily active on Substack. So my Substack is, justindaerr.substack.com. That's where I feel as though that's a place where I kind of wish it had existed back in the day a little bit more so, Because even though I've only been on it for about a year, I just thought like it's a place where you can kind of engage without having it to be like a quick one sentence type of thing, or like you can actually expand on a topic and be like, here's all the things I think about this thing, and here you go. So I've been trying to write on it every other week. So if you want to kind of follow some of my thinkings or something, that's a good place to go. For coaching or just my general website, it's all ALL dash of it, OFIT.com. There is a website that still exists with my name, justindaerr.com, but it exists just as an archive. So it was from racing. I've left it up, but it doesn't have any current stuff on it. It'll have some links to the current all of it page. And then if you wanted to email me, just my name at Gmail.
Awesome. Well, everybody, I speaking from experience, connecting with Justin was one of the highlights of my triathlon career, and definitely, as I said, my favorite training partner, the person I was like most psyched to see when I went to races that we were at together. And your triathlon experience will be similarly improved by connecting with Justin. So go subscribe to his Substack, get in touch with him if you're looking for a coach. You will not be sorry. Justin, thank you so much for coming to the Infirmary, and hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, I think it needs to be mentioned that my time with you and the Portland contingent was a real highlight of my time. I think specifically it was like in 2012, the training camp that Cliff had put together that year with that group of athletes. I don't think there could have been a more perfect group of people working together. It just I mean, the other years were good too, but there was something about that year where I just felt like there's just no other way I would have wanted to be spending my time than what I was doing right in that moment.
Yep.
So, and you were a big part of that.
100% how I felt those 17 to 20 days. It was just like, yeah. And that's what a great training camp should feel like. Those you're like utterly invested in the moment. But, yeah, thank you for those experiences. Thanks for coming on today. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your Monday.
You too. Cheers.